you have dialed has been changed. Please note the new number is...
BTC-TV, Channel 13. This is Scribbler, a portal to fiction, and I am your host, Ben Wustenberg. If you hear any noise in the background, don't be upset, don't be worried. It's just my wife. She's cooking and cleaning. Well, cooking. She's always cooking. Anyways, this is going out to you for Sunday. What I'm thinking of doing is doing this live. So I'm going to make this, and I'm going to have it ready for Sunday and put it out. But I'm also going to do a live reading on Sunday, just because I want to try it, and just because I can. And I don't know. We'll see how that works. I'll put this out for those people that, can't get up at that time in the morning. Or maybe it's too late at night. I don't know. It depends on where you live, right? This is a global economy, as they say. I like saying that, a global economy. Not that I'm getting paid. I can barely afford my wine anymore. I've had 2 people quit on me. I guess their cards expired, and so now it's like, I need more subscribers. The wine's not getting any cheaper now with these tariffs. Anyways, I'm going to continue reading, and this is Cinderella and Her Sisters. Sorry, I got something in my eyelash or something. The Cinderella and Her Sisters, and I'm going to start right now. Okay, here we go. George spends the next 2 weeks walking the length and width of the farm and the land around it. With the cast on his leg now removed, he finally has the freedom to roam the open countryside, and for the first time in years, it feels good to have no life or death worries. The smell of death no longer lingers in the landscape. There are no bloated bodies lying exposed in the sun. He takes the boys out and shows them how to set up traps, remembering how Jenkins, his father's gamekeeper, did the same with him. He has them setting up traps for the foxes and minks in the area. He's worried the 2 chickens they have will get killed and take away a large part of their diet, even if they do only lay eggs every other day or 3. He tells the boys they're responsible for the gardens. They have to help with the weeding, turn the soil over after harvesting, and water the rows of vegetables with an old wooden bucket he finds at the water pump. He tells them they have to do the work the women are unable to do because they're young men now, and he can see them beaming with pride as he says it. There are potatoes, beans, peas, carrots, cabbage, squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, beets, and turnips to care for, and everything has to be preserved for winter. They have to clean up the used canning jars and have them ready for pickling, as well as getting the sauerkraut buckets ready. Annette still goes to the hospital, but her visits are less frequent now and less urgent, which is something Colette is quick to point out and credits to George's arrival. Anastasia tells her it's all relevant to the time of year, just like it is for everyone else who volunteers at the hospital. The doctors know it, she tells her, and besides, they need the supplies Annette brings home with her. She would know this if she helped out once in a while. Colette looks at her sister with a frown, her knitted brow a line across her forehead. It's the first time Anastasia has spoken up, in effect betraying Colette with the defense of Annette. It was better when she wasn't talking, Colette exclaims, and then storms off. She takes the automobile and they run after her, afraid of what might happen if she leaves or where she might go. But of course, nothing happens. When she isn't in the house doing Colette's share of the work, Annette finds herself outside, helping the boys in the garden along with Anastasia and the Countess, hoeing, bagging potatoes, or carrying buckets of water. She helps Anastasia and the Countess pickle beets and get things ready for making sauerkraut. She helps the Countess care for Baltazzi as much as she can, between doing the laundry and helping Anastasia prepare dinner, and she still leaves herself time to put the children to bed after dinner, reading to both them and Baltazzi. When it seems there's just too much for her to do and not enough time to do it, she takes herself outside and leans against the wall of the old stable, sliding down to sit on the ground and watch as the sun starts to set. The days are as long as the shadows, and winter snow a memory and nothing more. She found an old bag of her father's tobacco hidden in the woodshed. She's almost certain her father took it from the dead soldier they buried in the back, and she's practiced rolling cigarettes with the same 3 papers until finally the day came when she could. She lights her cigarette, watching the late summer sun slip and fall away behind the trees, sinking deep into the western hills and brightening the world around her with a brilliant stain of red, gold, and orange before falling into the deep dark colors that finally give way to the dusk. She finds herself thinking about the past, about Vienna, while she waits, leaning against the stable. And why does she think about Vienna? Is it because she wants to hide from the present and the future? Or is she hiding from herself? There are always tears that come whenever she sits alone and lets herself think about everything that's happened and is happening around her, as she wonders what happened to the world they used to know. She tries not thinking about the dying soldiers in their hospital beds as much as she tries not thinking about the horrible wounds she dresses and changes on a daily basis. But most of all, she tries not to think about how she's become so insensitive to the horror of it all. Sometimes she tells herself she's lost sight of the reason she's even there in the first place. There are overwhelming numbers they all must learn to deal with. And then she thinks of how she's willing to hold a dying man in her arms and let him think she's his mother or his wife, or how the tears she spills for them are just as painful to her 3 days later as they are 3 weeks later, 3 months later, and yes, even 3 years later. It's proof to herself that she still cares, and no matter what she tells herself or what Colette says, she still cares. She looks up, wipes her tears, and butts the cigarette in the dirt, and pulling the pouch out of her top, she begins to roll a second cigarette. She doesn't know where George goes during the day when he's not here, and she doesn't think to ask him. He always returns with something for them to eat, and as long as there's food, there's nothing any of them will say about his comings and goings. She sees his shadow before she sees him. His long shadow always falls across her line of sight first, and she jumps up with a start, brushing the spilled tobacco off her dress, looking in his game bag to see if he has anything. He had nothing today. She has to go farther afield, he says, and she realizes the chances of him taking one of the boys along is even more remote. He pulls a broken trap out of the bag and tosses it onto the workbench. It's difficult climbing up and down the mountain slopes with a rifle and a small pack of food, he says. His back still pains him at the worst of times. So how does she expect one of the boys to do it, he asks. No one said you had to take them with you, she points out to him. I like taking them with me. I like the company, and they're eager to learn. Eager to kill something, you mean, she says with a caustic tone, and turns away, sitting on the wood pile and leaning against the wall. Again. Is that so bad? George asks. She watches as he hangs 3 traps on the nail in the post, and listens to them sing as she looks down at the ground. She realizes that he knows she needs these moments to herself, and he's willing to leave her to her thoughts, for which she's grateful. It's because of the workload she's taken on. Colette does little to help her anymore, and manages to get away with it because Annette's willing to do her chores and let Colette do as she pleases. Anastasia's doing more than her share as well, now that she's recovered from her attack. And where does Colette go when she leaves? She has a lover somewhere, she tells herself. She senses George looking at her, sitting with her elbows on her knees, her legs splayed open, not quite the lady the Countess would expect to see if she happened by at the moment, and she watches the setting sun play in her hair. She can see the first of the evening stars twinkling in the distance. What if the war goes on for another 3 or even 4 years, she asks. Don't you think the boys will want to be part of it? What if it goes on for another 6 or 7 years? Don't look at me like that. You know it's possible. The boys can't wait to go out there now. Do you think it matters if Dieter's 16 or 18 years old before he's sent out to fight? He's still a boy. They won't let a boy go to war. Not this war, at least, George says, looking up at the fading twilight. He drops into a squat beside her, taking her hand in his. You have to stop doing this to yourself. It's eating you up with worry. I have to go to the hospital tomorrow. We're running out of supplies. We need flour and salt. I don't like going there anymore. I wouldn't if I didn't feel I had to, but I have to. It's getting worse, though. They aren't just coming in with wounds. They're coming in because they're sick. It's the flu. Maybe you're doing too much, he suggests. Too much, she laughs lightly. If I don't do it, who will? Do you want me to send Colette? How about Anastasia? The Countess? She pulls a cigarette out of the bag and offers it to him. Then take me with you, he adds gently. He sits back against the wall after the flare of the match, enjoying the taste of the tobacco. It's been a long time since he's had a cigarette. And don't you have enough to do? We need wood for the winter. I don't know how, but we'll have to start chopping down trees and splitting wood if we want to keep up. I can't expect you to drop everything and go with me every time I have to leave. Why not, he asks, breathing in a lungful of smoke and watching the blue cloud fade into the evening. She smiles and shakes her head carefully. It's getting colder at night, and he watches the first hints of the new moon come up over the distant mountains, looking small and alone, looking like he sometimes feels, and he turns to look at her profile in the waning light. He picks up the tobacco pouch and offers her a cigarette. I like rolling them more than I do smoking them, she says, shaking her head. Lucky for me, he smiles. Whatever happened to that silver case you used to have? I remember you used to always have that thing in your pocket, she smiles. I left it at home, he says. I didn't want to lose it. It gives me something to go home for. What about your wife? Why bring her into the conversation, he grins. She punches him playfully, and he laughs, grabbing her arm before she can hit him again. He looks at her in the silence for a moment, and she can feel the tension mounting between them, growing, and she tries to pull herself away from him. He holds her tight, looking at her, and she feels herself surrendering to him, melting under his gaze as he pulls her closer and kisses her. She feels as if her head is going to explode. She wraps her arms around him and feels his hand on her, pulling at the buttons of her bodice with his hard, rough, callous hands. She bends back, letting herself fall to the ground as his mouth searches her body with a hunger she thinks will devour them both. She wants him. She needs him, she tells herself, and she puts her hands on his head and guides his mouth to her aching nipples, wanting to feel his breath on her naked flesh, wanting him to kiss her and to kiss them. I want you to love me, George, she says in a whisper, forever. Well, there you go. My goodness. Opening up into another sex scene. Oh, but not there. I mean, they're outside. Whatever. Anyways, it's more comfortable inside on the bed. So that was my plan, or is my plan, and hopefully we'll see how it all works out. Should work out fine, and the reason why I want to do it is that I have so much trouble sometimes, like getting this thing uploaded and ready for Sunday. And it's like sometimes it takes me hours and hours, and like last week it just took me like done, just like that. Like holy smokes! So I guess tonight I'll be making my movie and seeing if it'll work. It is what it is, right? Anyways, that's all there is for today. So I shall see you next week at the same bat time and the same bat channel. So, ciao for now, arrivederci, and have a good night and a good weekend.